Here's something no one ever tells you about A-level maths past papers. Doing more of them is not always better. Okay, in fact, if you're doing them the wrong way, and a lot of students are, you could be burning through your last month of prep and actually reinforcing your mistakes. I know because I did exactly that in AS level. More papers, worse results. Then in A2, I did fewer papers and somehow I improved significantly. So how did that happen? The difference wasn't volume, it was a feedback loop. So if your Edexcel or International Edexcel maths exam is about a month away, this video is going to give you 2 things that will actually improve your grade. So let's get into it. Everyone tells you to grind past papers. Your teacher says it, your friends are doing it, every study channel does it, and they're not wrong, to be fair. Past papers are the single best tool you have. But here's the issue. Doing a past paper, leaving it in a pile, and moving on to the next one is not actually revision. That's just practice for practicing's sake. Think about it this way. Imagine a footballer who has a really bad habit. Okay, let's say they strike the ball with the wrong part of their foot. Every session, they take 50 shots, they're working hard, they're grinding, they're doing a lot of volume, but because nobody is correcting the technique there, they're not improving. And they're just getting faster doing it wrong, right? And so by the end of the season, that bad habit is completely locked in. And that's exactly what happens when you do A-level past papers with no proper feedback loop. You keep hitting the same question types the wrong way, you keep writing down the same kinds of incomplete working, and the mark scheme never actually changes your understanding. Okay, you just check the answer and you move on. So here's what actually works. You do a past paper, you mark it, and then this is the step that is really important, that's really easy and obvious, but is very easy to skip. You go back into the topics where you drop marks before you touch another paper. Sounds obvious, I know, but it's very easy when you're studying and doing lots of exam papers to get complacent and convince yourself that you're actually practicing when you're not actually improving on that practice. Okay, you're getting the same grade each time and it feels productive, but at the same time you're missing out on marks because you're not going deeply and refining certain topics. So here's how to run the cycle properly. Step 1 is to do the paper under time conditions. Now that's obvious, we all know that, but the reason why to, especially do it under timed conditions is because a lot of people will just not do this and they'll do the past paper under, like free time or whatever, and they're not going to have that constraint. You need that constraint because it's going to force you to hone your focus for that particular, paper. It's not just about doing the question, you're doing a question per minute, okay? It's a ratio. So that's important. Step 2, and this is where, accuracy actually plays a big role, is to mark it using an actual mark scheme and be strict, okay? When I say an actual mark scheme, I mean not just putting a tick or a cross. I mean understand method marks, accuracy marks, and how to apply that to the paper you just wrote. Okay, so for instance, an M mark means you get credit for a correct method even if you made a small slip in the working out. But A marks, those are key because those are, you need, there's no wiggle room on the A marks. It's like you either get it or you don't. So if you're losing those A marks quite consistently, that tells you something very specific. Okay, so that brings us to step 3, and that's actually to categorize those mistakes into 3 types. So you got the silly errors, which obviously those happen quite a bit. You know the method, you just slipped up. Those happen very often, and the trick there is that's really just a focus thing. It's like plus and minus signs, all that sort of thing, and that is a feedback loop in of itself because it means that you need to really refine your focus. So maybe take a little bit longer per question, and don't just rush through it. Be really methodical with how you do the question. The second one is obviously gaps in understanding. So that's where you understand the general topic, but you don't understand, this certain part of it, for instance. That means obviously going back to that topic and refining it. Now the real ones, the real blind spots here are those where you look at the question and you don't even know where to start. Those are high priority, so get to those as soon as you can and really try to nail those from an understanding perspective before you do another past paper with it. So ultimately, that feedback loop is what separates students who plateau versus those who improve really rapidly. So that's why you see people who were doing terribly before, but now all of a sudden in a month they're able to get a really high grade, right? So this is the method behind the madness there. So the plateau comes from just simply repetition, but the improvement comes from repetition plus refinement, and that's really key. Now look, obviously the marking stage can be quite time consuming. That's why I've actually got a community with some students. I know one of my students, they did a worksheet and they got 100% on a test they had to do with their kind of tutor they were working with. So that was really positive, and obviously the marking process can take a long time. So if you want to shorten that speed up with an automated marking system where it's done for you, make sure to join the community below, and you can really speed things up that way. But here's the thing, right? Let's imagine you've run the system perfectly. You've got the feedback loop going, you're marking it quickly, you're identifying the gaps. That's great. But now there's something that's working against you in the background. Okay, something that has nothing to do with maths itself. And if you don't address it, it can cap how much of this actually sticks in your brain. Okay, so before you sit down and do your next paper, you need to hear this part. Now, I want to talk about something practical that I actually do myself. Okay, because I think the way this advice usually gets framed is completely wrong. Most people frame it as social media is bad, put your phone away, be disciplined, right? And we've all heard that advice, and it's very reiterated, but no one really goes into, the why behind that, right? So why is that important? Essentially, it all boils down to dopamine, right? So again, I'm not a scientist or anything, but I know that social media usage is heavily correlated to dopamine, right? It has a similar effect to what drugs like cocaine, for instance, have in your brain. To some degree, it mimics it. Whatever, I'm not a scientist. But the key thing is, with that in mind, you need to recognize that in order to focus, you need to have some kind of dopamine baseline, because otherwise you're going to be completely distracted all the time. So an actual step here is to really think to yourself, okay, if I've got like Instagram and TikTok on my phone, whenever you go into those apps, you're getting sucked into like an energy void where your energy and your focus is getting sucked into that app. Okay, now your brain as a result is getting a bit of stimulation there. Whereas if you starve your brain of that stimulation, okay, and you heavily restrict social media, and you really kind of kill it, at least temporarily, your brain will almost crave studying. It's really weird. It will crave hard work because your brain needs something to do, right? If you're really bored, your brain needs something. So as a result, doing a maths paper all of a sudden seems exciting. Like it's got something to it where you're solving problems and your brain likes that. Whereas if you're taking breaks and hopping onto social media in between those periods and you're getting sucked in, your brain is getting stimulation from that. So all of a sudden, doing a maths paper doesn't seem as exciting to it. So you really need to kind of think about it that way. I'm not telling you to get rid of your phone or get rid of everything, and try not to be preachy about it. But I know all I can say is it has worked for me. Right? Whenever I work now, having social media heavily limited makes a massive difference. And the way to do it is to really reframe it. They are basically energy voids that suck your energy. And when everything's an energy void in some respect. Okay, working is an energy void, going to the gym's an energy void because you're using energy for that. But the social media energy void doesn't give you a payoff, whereas a studying energy void does. You're studying for a maths exam, you're doing a maths paper, that energy is going to have a ROI to it. The ROI of going on Instagram is basically minimal, unless you're like a producer, that's different, but that's just something to keep in mind. Okay, so when people say, just delete social media, whatever, that's very generic advice. I don't really like that. The way to think about it is from a dopamine management perspective and a energy management perspective. So to put that all together, guys, make sure that this month you're not simply doing volume and grinding out papers for the sake of it. you need to run the loop. Okay, so you're going to be doing volume and refinement together to ensure that, yes, you're getting the repetition in, which is essential, but it's refined, so you're improving each time. That's the key here. And at the same time, by heavily limiting your social media usage, you're going to be able to focus a lot better, okay? And again, it's not generic advice. You now understand the nuts and bolts behind it, so you're a lot more practical with it. But now there's another issue. What if you're doing the feedback loop? What if you're restricting your dopamine so you're focused, but when it comes to your refinement, you can't actually find, the solutions and worked examples that you're looking for? Well, luckily, I recently produced a past paper walkthrough in detail, for the Edexcel kind of series. That's International Edexcel. So if you want, go check that out, and you'll be able to see, some proper walkthroughs there. But appreciate your time. Have a good one.